Kim, thank you so much for stopping by the podcast. How are you?
I'm great. It's an amazing time at this conference, and I'm just really lucky to be here.
What's been one quick tip you've gotten so far from the conference, the first couple speakers?
I think it's terrible, but I don't remember the speaker's name.
Yeah.
But he's a psychologist.
Okay.
And he just talked a lot about the different, kind of the unconscious world that goes on when someone's navigating, anything. And so it's just a reminder that marketing really at the foundation is psychology. And that you have to kind of market to a specific person and use kind of, the reasons why people give in your communications.
Yeah, super interesting. I actually was talking to an individual earlier who does door-to-door fundraising in Germany.
Oh, wow.
And he talked a lot about sort of the psychology of giving, the psychology of fundraising, going door-to-door. Wow, that's really loud.
Yes.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I always like to start off with why nonprofits? Why do you care about nonprofits? Why are you helping nonprofits? So tell us a little bit about that story and then what you do.
Sure. So I am a nonprofit enthusiast. I grew up in nonprofit. I like to say in my career I kind of fell into it, and I fell into the marketing and the fundraising, part of the nonprofit, and I just never left. It really felt right. I went to school for psychology, and so it kind of just brought me naturally to this place where we're talking to people and engaging them and inspiring their generosity. And I've never looked back. And now, I was in the trenches of fundraising and marketing at an international nonprofit for the first decade of my career. And now I'm consulting, but I wouldn't do it for anyone else but nonprofits because I love inspiring generosity. I love helping nonprofits make more revenue. I like to say that revenue makes my heart flutter, and it really does.
I love that,
because I know what it's going to do, and I know how it's going to impact the world.
How did a nonprofit, your clients respond to that? Because obviously, fundraisers, they know they have to raise money.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that, or maybe more historically, more so, but nonprofits kind of have this they get weird when you talk about money, right? And so how do they respond to that? Revenue makes my heart flutter. Do they get it? Do they appreciate it?
Yeah, I work pretty much with development and fundraising professionals, and so it makes their heart flutter too.
Yeah.
And they know, what the bottom line is. It's not about the revenue. It's about the people or the cause that's being helped and elevated because of the revenue and because inspiring that generosity.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, we think about fundraising in kind of a negative sense that we're hounding people to give, but really in the best sense, we're giving them the opportunity to do something bigger than themselves and to impact the world. And I think that's a really important opportunity for people because we all want to find meaning and we all want to have impact.
Absolutely. You work with development teams. What's sort of the core areas that you focus on in your consulting? What are the areas that you really specialize in?
Yeah, so I specialize in strategic planning, specifically around direct response, but also building donor journeys that are really donor centric and make sure that cultivation is at the forefront, not just the fundraising. And then I also do copywriting and really any kind of marketing task or fundraising task that somebody has. But overall, I specialize in digital.
Got it. Cool. With that, be curious to hear any trends that you're seeing or campaigns that either you've helped lead, create, or just things that have caught your eye in the in nonprofit fundraising that you think is worth sharing.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go rogue.
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you something in the for-profit that I think nonprofits should be doing more.
Okay.
So, we all know that CTV is kind of the growing trend that nonprofits can get a huge, return on ad spend, not directly, but kind of in the digital sphere from CTV. And recently I was targeted for a lending club. I just bought a new house. So, they're coming at me for a mortgage. And the ad had a particular kind of an old school celebrity, but I know who they were. I'm in my 30s. I'm pretty sure they used that person and they targeted me because I would know that person.
Yeah.
And then, as I was looking at the CTV ad, I go on my phone and I'm scrolling and an Instagram ad comes up with the same celebrity, the same kind of shtick that they had, and I immediately recognized it from, and I was only half listening to this ad. With commercials, I'm not really focused. I'm doing other things. I'm a millennial, so I'm doing 10 things at once.
Yeah.
But I absolutely 100% noticed it, and I just kept getting followed around with this same shtick and this same. Nonprofits do this, right? It's not new that we're retargeting and we're building the retargeting pools and we're following people around. But this was such a seamless donor journey that I 100% know this brand now. Like, the awareness is there.
It's almost like they accelerated the awareness. It sounds like this all happened pretty quickly.
Very quickly and very comprehensively, and all with the same story.
Yeah.
So it was very memorable versus just, kind of disjointed.
Yeah. It wasn't
campaigns.
like a bunch of like random hodgepodge. It was like it was very cohesive.
Yeah,
and
it was a storyboard onslaught, really.
Yeah. Okay. Have you tried implementing that with any of your clients? And how's that working?
Yeah. So one of the things I do is help with the donor journey, and this is something that I really suggest to all of my clients, but also it's something I'm speaking about tomorrow.
Okay.
Is just really filling the top of the funnel with qualified people that might be interested in your program. And so, I got to a place when I was transforming a digital program where we just topped out. We couldn't, buy out any more SEM. There was no more demand for the brand. And so we had to kind of, try new things, new channels to try to get more awareness so that it would drive those lower funnel channels.
Yeah.
And so we did that through comprehensive donor journeys where it wasn't just CTV, but then it was a second touch, a third touch, and more to really bring them along the donor journey.
Yeah, interesting. There's a lot of talk in like marketing about like sort of like, is it a marketer's role to like capture demand or to create demand? And so how does that sort of like play out in your own marketing efforts?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I think that if it's one, we're kind of missing out.
Yeah.
You can probably capture that demand for so long, and then again, you kind of top out, and you need to create the demand.
Yeah. Okay. How does a nonprofit know if they've peaked in terms of like their ad spend, or they've hit the kind of like threshold of their audience? Like any practical like nuggets there that like help organizations understand when they've maybe peaked, and like it's not about spending more, it's just about efficiencies maybe like more mid-funnel with the, like all the prospects that you're driving.
Yeah, I think, it comes down to what your most important KPIs are, and when those aren't growing anymore, then it's time to kind of reinvest and maybe try new things. And so one of the big things that I try to push nonprofits on is to make sure that it's not just a great return on ad spend, but that they're actively getting new donors, because sometimes your ad spend is so good and so efficient that you're not throwing the net wide enough to get new donors.
Yeah.
And so when you're increasing your spend to a certain point and you're not getting those new donors, or you're not getting, the return on ad spend, that might be, a clue in that you need to create more demand on the brand to fuel those lower funnel channels.
Got it. So you mentioned earlier that you spent a decade working at a nonprofit, international nonprofit, and now you're, in the consulting role. You have a lot of experience in fundraising and marketing. So if you were to like go back, to the beginning of your career, like what would you tell yourself to do differently or to double down on as you've kind of gained more and more experience?
I would definitely tell myself to take more risks.
Okay.
I think, how I grew up in the nonprofit sphere, I have had leaders that were really risk adverse and would kind of drill down on every detail of something and would really look at everything in, direct response type measurements. And then I had leaders that really empowered me to take risk, because without risk, there's not as much of a reward.
Yeah.
Some risks pay out
Yeah.
and some don't. And I think what I really learned is that the risks really pushed and empowered the growth of our digital program.
Okay.
And so I think I would go back and say, don't be so scared of the risk, and don't be so scared of, how this would be perceived if it didn't work, and instead kind of do your due diligence first. Make sure your leadership knows what to expect, the good and the bad, and go for it.
Yeah. I feel like marketing, it needs to be, and it's hard because most of the times like executives, don't understand marketing.
Yeah.
And they think it's like a more of a binary, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like it's more of like a lab, right? It's like we got to experiment with all different types of things to get the right sort of like results that we're looking for. It's
right.
Very often is it like one thing versus another, right? It's a combination of experimenting and did you feel like you didn't like? You mentioned you had two different types of leaders, like one that like promoted more risk, one that like maybe discouraged it. Do you see this as a systemic problem in nonprofits today, like just the lack of like risk taking, or was that just more in your experience?
I think it is out there.
Yeah.
Those leaders that are really empowering you, I feel are more rare.
Yeah.
Where you can make a mistake and you truly don't have to be concerned about what comes next.
Yeah.
So I definitely think also, the top leaders in an organization have a lot of pressure on them. They're probably getting pressure from the people above them, which makes them put the pressure on you. But I do think that it's something that is holding back nonprofits, and it's something that I kind of suss out as I'm working with nonprofits too, to see what their capacity for risk, or what their capacity even for, data, non-specific data where we're kind of investing in one place, but you might see revenue spike in another place. What's their comfortability with that, to see kind of where we can go? Because I feel that, and I'm not a huge risk taker where I'm saying, let's just throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. A lot of that's going to fall down on the floor.
Right.
But taking those, mitigating those risks and taking those, smart ways, I think could really pay off and result in a huge increase in revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's like creating a culture around failure, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like it's okay to fail, as long as we learn.
Yes.
Right? Like if we're gonna try something and it didn't work, why didn't it work? And if we create more of that type of culture within nonprofits, I think we'll see a lot more innovation.
Yes.
Because typically, like that like fear of failure is what prevents innovation from happening.
And I think it's like a fear of failure, but I think it's also sometimes the capacity of, other teams that might be working with a development team or a marketing team.
Yeah.
They don't want to put in huge amounts of effort for an innovative project that may not have as much impact as the work that goes into it. And so I think that there's a little bit of that too, where nonprofits are not staffed for innovation. And so they get, the development team gets pushed back on that.
Yeah, makes sense. One last question, and then we're going to do some rapid fire fun questions.
Okay.
But as we're, coming out of the pandemic, whatever that means, kind of like as like things are starting to normalize around the country, has it shaped like the way that you consult to your clients? Any like learnings from the pandemic that like you've taken and like this has actually made me a better marketer, a better fundraiser that'd be worth sharing? Yeah,
I think what was really an aha moment for me, I was in nonprofit during the pandemic.
Okay.
Was that we always had the beneficiaries of our care, and we always talked about what they needed. And when the pandemic hit, our donors were needy too. And I don't mean financially, I mean this was a big emotional toll for them. It was difficult to isolate. A lot of them were older donors, so they were more isolated. And we had to kind of turn to not only talk about caring about our beneficiaries, but we needed to actually care for our donors and put in, different engagement tactics or cultivation tactics, or even just one-to-one touch points. I know that this is major gifts have been doing this forever, but in direct response, you typically talk to the masses. And so we really put in much more of a one-to-one feel in the communications, because we realized like our donors are people and they're needy right now too, and we needed to care for them. And I think it's really, I always feel like I've been donor-centric and I care about the donors because they're making magic happen in the world. But I think that it really pushed me to be more donor-centric and not just talk, in our communications about what we do and the impact that they're having, but to really find the value proposition that a donor would cling to and make them feel good and honored, and try to, replay that message over and over and over so that they could feel really connected and really good about giving.
Yeah.
More than just the impact.
Right.
The impact is great, but for them to really feel that impact.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's super insightful. All right, so we're going to ask a few fun questions.
Okay.
And so we'll see whether they're right or wrong, the answers. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
All right, so first off, digital reading or an actual book?
Oh, digital reading.
Digital reading. Any good books that you've read recently that's worth mentioning?
Not fundraising and marketing focused. I'm reading a book about how, I think it's called Trauma Stays in the Body or something. It's just very interesting of how, vets and such kind of process through their trauma.
Okay, got it. Pizza or salad?
Salad.
Salad. Beach or the mountains? If you had to choose one. Yep.
Beach.
Yep. Football or football?
Neither.
Okay. Dogs or cats?
Both.
Really?
I have 4 cats, but I desperately want a dog too.
They're adopting dogs over here.
I know, but my cats would
freak out.
fire me if I came home with that.
4 cats. That's a commitment.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
All indoor, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Funnel cake or cheesecake?
Cheesecake.
Cheesecake. And the last one, The Goonies or Sandlot?
Sandlot.
Sandlot. No one has said The Goonies yet today.
Really?
Everyone has said Sandlot. One person was very controversial and said both are overrated.
Oh, that's rude.
And we're going to delete his podcast for sure.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep.